I'm Judd Myers.
I'm Scott Tipton.
Welcome to Blast Off.
Welcome to the Blast Off podcast. It's time for another one of our home shows where we look at the tales from inside the comic shop and the shelves themselves. What's up for retail this week, Judd?
Well, this week we're going to go into the register and we're going to find out what happens when the change that you make inside of a customer's hand changes you and them at the same time. What about in Comics 101?
Well, this week's 101 is probably the most frequently asked question I get is what happens when your comic book company just has too many Earths?
Don't you hate it when that happens?
There's always too many.
Enjoy.
I'm Scott Tipton, and this is Comics 101. So what's the difference between the Justice League and the Justice Society? Who came first? Wait, if Superman and Batman were around in the 1940s, how come they don't age? Why are there two Flashes and two Green Lanterns? I hear everyone talking about the Crisis. What was the Crisis? These may all seem like different questions, but believe it or not, they all have the same answer. However, it is an exceedingly long answer. So buckle in for a two-parter here at Comics 101. As we tackle the question of DC Comics continuity in the Golden and Silver Ages, how it fit together, how it sometimes didn't, and the solution that finally worked a little bit too well. National Comics, now known as DC, ran rampant over the other publishers in the early 1940s with their all-star lineup of superhero characters: Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, The Flash, Green Lantern, Hawkman, and many others. Realizing a good thing when they saw it, the folks at National decided to maximize their Mystery Man dollar in 1940 in the pages of All-Star Comics number 3 with the debut of the Justice Society of America. Editor Sheldon Meyer and writer Gardner Fox not only invented the concept of the superhero team, but also the very concept of the crossover of separately published characters in popular literature. Nowadays, these things happen everywhere. Aliens vs. Predator, Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, Freddy vs. Jason, books, TV shows, movies, you name it. But it all happened first in comic books, and it happened first with the Justice Society of America. The charter membership of the JSA consisted of the Green Lantern, the Flash, Hawkman, the Sandman, the Spectre, Dr. Fate, the Atom, and Hourman, along with comedy relief Johnny Thunder and his magical Thunderbolt. By the way, some of these names may sound familiar, but these aren't the familiar characters you may know from Super Friends or the Justice League movies. These are the originals. Green Lantern still has his power ring, Flash runs fast, Hawkman's got the wings, but the origins, costumes, and details are all quite different. As for the unfamiliar names, my personal favorite was the Hourman. From the looks of him, Hourman wasn't much different than the rest of the cape and cowl set that was overrunning the comics of the day. Hourman was really Rex Tyler, a mild-mannered chemist who would devise the secret formula of Miraclo. When trouble beckoned, Rex would pop a Miraclo pill and gain lightning-fast reflexes and a strength of 50 men. And here's the catch: only for 60 minutes. Think about it. He is the only superhero who advertises his Achilles heel right up front in his name. He's Hourman. Superman does not call himself Kryptonite Man. Rex, if any criminals are paying attention, they should realize if they just mind the clock and pace themselves, they'll have this guy sewed up in about an hour. Luckily for Rex Tyler, no one ever did. Superman and Batman were honorary members of the Justice Society who appeared once or twice, but not at all on a regular basis. The JSA's membership was fluid in those days, thanks to an unusual rule in the charter. Once a member received their own solo comic magazine, they had to leave the team. The fact that they seemed to realize that they were comic book characters were never dwelled upon. A metaphysical dilemma best left alone. Therefore, when climbing sales meant that Flash and Green Lantern received their own magazines, 2 slots opened up, quickly filled by Dr. Midnight and Starman. Other members later joined included Wonder Woman, Black Canary, Wildcat, and Mr. Terrific. The JSA lasted for 57 issues in All-Star Comics, providing not only some of the best action comics of the period, but also some of the finest comics of the era, period. Although the series was by definition a little formulaic, with the team unfailingly meeting up at the beginning of each issue, meeting up with adversity in individual chapters, then reuniting to achieve victory in the final chapter. The stories had a surprising degree of social consciousness, championing such issues as democracy, charity, tolerance, and brotherhood. In a time when vicious, racist caricatures of Japanese and Germans were commonplace in wartime comics, the Justice Society's more enlightened approach stood out. Like all good things, in 1951, the JSA came to an end, a victim of changing tastes. Superheroes were no longer the hottest thing on the market. Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman remained in publication, but the rest of National superhero line fell away, replaced by romance, westerns, and a number of other genres. It seemed the day the superhero was done. For about 5 years, anyway. DC Comics editor Julius Schwartz decided to give superheroes another shot in 1956, with the revival of The Flash in the pages of Showcase number 4. Writer John Broome and artist Carmine Infantino kept the name and the concept, the fastest man alive, but started from scratch with everything else. An all-new origin, a new secret identity, and best of all, a modern, streamlined new costume and art style from Infantino, which forever set the standard for the illustration of super speed characters in comics. The all-new Flash was a hit right away, and was soon back in his own magazine. Not long after, Schwartz set his sights on reviving the Green Lantern, much as he did the Flash. Writer Gardner Fox and artist Gil Kane introduced the all-new Green Lantern in Showcase number 22, with a harder sci-fi feel and a cooler, less outlandish costume. Just like the Flash before him, the new Green Lantern was a runaway hit, and the series was given its own magazine in 1960. Now that Flash and Green Lantern were back, and since Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, and Aquaman had never went away, editor Julius Schwartz saw the writing on the wall. It was time for the Justice Society to return. Just as before, though, Schwartz was not shy about making changes. Feeling that Society sounded too highfalutin, Schwartz opted to change the feature's name to Justice League of America, thinking that young readers used to hearing about football leagues would find the name more familiar. In the February 1960 issue of Brave and the Bold, the all-new Justice League of America made its debut. Writer Gardner Fox and artist Mike Sekowsky teamed up Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Flash, the Green Lantern, and Aquaman with DC's new science fiction hero, the Martian Manhunter, and the readers showed up in droves. Within 8 months, the Justice League had their own magazine, and superheroes were back in a big way. Now that the superheroes had returned to DC, some of the longtime readers began to lobby for the return of the originals. This, however, was problematic once you stop to think about it. How do you reconcile a Flash that was active during World War II with a modern Flash of the 1960s? Especially if both were known associates of a still young Superman and Batman. Complicating the problem was the fact that the new Flash was seen enjoying an issue of the original Flash comic in his very first appearance. Flash writer Gardner Fox, who was a creative force behind both the original Justice Society and the new Justice League, had it all worked out. In Flash number 123, Flash of Two Worlds, Fox revealed his master plan. The modern Flash, Barry Allen, while performing at a charity benefit, accidentally altered his vibrational frequency and found himself in a world that looked identical to his own but with striking differences. Most significant, his childhood hero from comic books, the original Flash, Jay Garrick, was very real, now retired and in his 40s. The two Flashes realized that they resided on parallel Earths. On Earth 1 lived Barry Allen in the modern Justice League, while Jay Garrick and the retired Justice Society, including parallel but now older duplicates of Superman and Batman, lived on Earth 2. How did Barry Allen read about the original Flash in the comics? Well, according to Barry, Flash comic book writer Gardner Fox claimed the stories came to him in dreams, so obviously, when Fox was asleep, his mind was tuned in on Jay Garrick's vibratory Earth. Obviously. Readers, some of whom had never known there had been another Flash, demanded to see more of these alternate versions of their favorite heroes. Gardner Fox obliged in Justice League of America 21 in Crisis on Earth 1, in which the Justice League finally met with the Justice Society of America, freshly out of retirement, to face a conglomeration of enemies from both Earths. So there you have it. Parallel Earths. The original 1940s Justice Society lives on Earth 2. The Justice League lives on Earth 1. Simple, right? The problem was the idea was so simple and so satisfying, and since the readers kept demanding their yearly visit from the Justice Society, the powers that be at DC couldn't resist adding to the concept. After all, if 2 Earths are good, then 3 are better. That's right. Before long, the JSA and JLA had to contend with yet another Earth, Earth 3, the home of the crime syndicate. On Earth 3, history tended to run in reverse, with Columbus discovering Europe, colonial England winning the Revolutionary War, and President John Wilkes Booth assassinated by that scoundrel actor Abe Lincoln. Accordingly, there was no Justice League. In its place was the crime syndicate. Ultraman, an evil Superman look-alike who gained a new superpower with each exposure to kryptonite. Owlman, a sinister Batman-like villain with a belt full of crime gimmicks in his super-evolved brain. Superwoman, a sinister analog to Wonder Woman. Johnny Quick, a fiendish duplicate of the Flash. And Power Ring, who, well, you get the idea by now. Earth 3's sole superhero, by the way, was a fellow by the name of Luthor. We'll get to him next time. Okay then, still pretty easy to follow. Earth 1 is the Justice League, Earth 2 is the Justice Society, and Earth 3 is the Crime Syndicate. Piece of cake. However, DC was not content to leave well enough alone. Having purchased Quality Comics' stable of comic book characters, DC needed to put them somewhere. Enter Earth X. On Earth X, World War II had never ended, and the US was still barely holding out against a Nazi Germany that had dominated the rest of the globe. At the behest of Uncle Sam, yes, Uncle Sam is a real comic book character at the time, the Justice League traveled to Earth X to help him and the rest of the freedom fighters, with characters such as Phantom Lady, Black Condor, Dollman, and the Human Bomb. With the help of the Justice League, the freedom fighters put away the Nazis once and for all. A few years after that, DC purchased the Captain Marvel characters from Fawcett, and Earth S for Shazam, naturally, was introduced. On Earth S lived Captain Marvel Jr., Mary Marvel, yes, Uncle Marvel, Dr. Savannah, and all the other characters affiliated with the original Captain Marvel comics. When DC purchased the Charlton action heroes from the now-defunct Charlton Comics, well, they can't be running on Earth 1 now, can they? Soon the Blue Beetle, the Question, and their compatriots were revealed to be living on Earth 4. Even the Earth on which we, the readers in the real world, lived was occasionally visited by the Justice League. It was dubbed Earth Prime. By the early 1980s, what once was a single DC universe had now become the DC Multiverse, with at least 7 known parallel Earths, and presumably countless more waiting to be discovered. Some readers and comics professionals felt the whole thing horribly convoluted and needlessly complex, while others embraced the notion of the multiverse and the wide variety of story possibilities it allowed. You can count me firmly in the latter camp. One of the first Justice League comics I ever read was a JLA-JSA team-up, and I was instantly hooked. It didn't seem that tough to comprehend to me, and I was only 7. The young heroes live on Earth 1, the old heroes live on Earth 2. What was appealing about the Earth 2 characters was that they could change in ways that the mainstream DC superheroes never could. Superman got married, while Batman went a little bit nuts after his wife died, none other than Selina Kyle, aka Catwoman, and Batman eventually became the rabidly anti-superhero police commissioner of Gotham City. The characters were allowed to mature, to raise families, and even to die, real permanent deaths, unlike the cliffhanger-style just kidding deaths comics readers had grown accustomed to. Rather than being confused by the parallel Earths as a young reader, I was fascinated, and picked up all the Earth 2 appearances I could find. However, by 1985, there were some people who didn't agree. One of them was DC publisher Jeanette Kahn, and soon everything would change. Meet back next week to find out how. You know, it's the kind of thing we don't notice as much being in the store every day, because to my mind, I look at the store and it's as gorgeous as it was the day we opened. But I recently looked back at some photos from our opening weekend, because it's just been 4 years now we've been open. And I see so much space. I was like, how did we not fill up the space better that opening weekend? There was just, it looked so empty. And the other thing that really struck me is our huge prose section, which has become, in a lot of ways, kind of the beating heart of the store. It's barely there. Barely there. We had maybe like 1/3 of our front wall was just a few smattering of some sci-fi books. And now that prose section is like the first thing you see when you walk in.
Yeah. I always wanted to layer that in. When I worked at Forbidden Planet in London, and this was like late 80s, early 90s, they had 2 floors, and the bottom floor was all science fiction fantasy prose. And the upstairs was all the comic book content. And there was this winding staircase. And so what happened is I'd talk to somebody upstairs about comics, and I'd go, yeah, but Alfred Bester did that, in this novel at, Demolish Man. Who's Alfred Bester? And I'd go, wait right here. And then I would run all the way downstairs, and I'd go, I need some Bester. And I'd run all the way back up and say, look. But they always had a way, and from what I understand in their new location, they do as well, of mixing prose and comics together. And I always wanted to do that, but it's very difficult. We have smaller spaces and retail spaces, and it's hard to marry the two. The only reason why it's hard is because people don't make the effort, but they also don't have staff and people that are experienced and well-read enough to really marry the two and bring people from one thing to another. I think we just didn't know whether people were going to respond to it or not. And as with everything else in a store, you put something in and you see it start to grow, and so you water it. And we kind of watered our prose section to become not just, here are the classics that you need to read, it's very important that you do, but also things that come recommended to us, or things that we stumble across, or things that just came back into print after many, many years of being missing. And also the fact that there are less bookstores.
Yeah.
There really are not many where we are, and which is very sad. There are some secondhand bookstores that are wonderful, wonderful stores. And then there's the odd Barnes & Noble here and there. But where we are, we're it. We have local schools and libraries that order from us because, we're the local shop. And when you have a kid from North Hollywood Public High School walk in and say, who's Ray Bradbury? Yeah, I'm going to have all the Ray Bradbury books for you. There is no way you're going to come into this shop and just buy a Batman comic. You're going to read Golden Apples of the Sun.
And what's great about this too is, and I see this happen all the time in the store with you and with Harley, you do this little pre-interview with new customers of what do you like to read? What do you like to watch? And so we get this kind of cross recommendation where somebody will walk out not just with comics, but with comics and with prose. Because it's all literature.
Yes.
It's all books. For me, my idea of the perfect comic book store was always just the perfect bookstore. And watching us kind of step into that shape has been really gratifying.
Yeah, we look forward to more people giving their recommendations. I was thinking about doing something interesting with the website, and maybe not contests, but something that we do where we're interactive with people to say, what are your favorite classic science fiction fantasy books? What would you like to see in the stores near you that you haven't seen for a long time? What is it that speaks to you and why? And maybe start to shape a little bit around input from people, not just in our neighborhood, but all over the world. Write in and tell us what you think about that. Retails, $3.24. For a little over 3 years, Jerry has walked among us. Or maybe it was just 3 years ago that I began noticing him. He kind of just appeared on my radar one day as he shuffled along the comic racks, eyes to the floor. I have to admit that he made me a little nervous. There was something not quite right about him. He was portly, off balance, his white hair askew. He was certainly in his 50s, but his mannerisms were those of a child. His mustache was uneven, and his whiskers patchy. Obviously, there was some effort made to shave, but the job most definitely went awry. His clothes were plain, worn, and unconcerned with the world around them. Jerry came in alone. Always. He kept his eyes only on the floor and on the comics. Even at the register, he never made eye contact. He struggled with his money, always dollar bills and random change, which he counted out at the register. Jerry was quiet. Jerry was strange. Jerry was an outsider among outsiders. and Jerry was destined to become one of my all-time favorite customers. I began tracking his visits. Sometimes he came in the morning, sometimes at night. Jerry's Wednesdays were Thursdays, or Sundays, or any day in between. He had no concept of deliveries or cancellations or what the latest comic book event might be. He had no notion of the intricacies of the debates we had with one another on the floor of our shop. The only thing important to Jerry seemed to be which of his favorite characters were on the cover. Didn't matter if the issue was in the middle of a storyline, didn't matter if it was issue 3 of a 4-issue miniseries that he'd not read. If it looked good and felt good in his hands, that was the one Jerry had to have. And 1 is the exact number of comic books he ever bought on his visits. Once a week, he'd pick 1 out, pay his fare, and head back out into the world. Now, don't get me wrong, there were a few rules to Jerry's system. A small compass to keep the weekly ritual on course. It had to be a team book. Preferably, they were all on the front cover. It absolutely had to be in the DC universe. Other publishers need not apply. And it had to cost $2.99. Jerry had a mean bit of trouble with his hands. Obviously a byproduct of extensive diabetes or some other kind of malady that affected his ability not just to open and close them, but to feel the things he held. He came in with dollar bills, easy to just pass over a counter and change in his pockets. He'd grab a handful and struggle to count it out, 1 coin at a time. But Jerry quickly realized what a $2.99 comic book would cost him. With sales tax added on, his treasure would always come out to the same amount, $3.24. Finding a quarter in the palm full of change is the easiest sort of coin fishing a guy with stiff hands can hope to do, and it's a hell of a lot easier having the guy ringing him up drop a penny into his palm as change than have to sweat and struggle counting out nickels and dimes as payment. $3 bills, 1 quarter, a penny's change. $3 bills, 1 quarter, a penny's change. Week in, week out, it always looked the same. He seemed to never be interested in speaking to anyone around him, and he certainly didn't want to speak to me. But boy, did I try. "Can I help you find anything?" I'd say. He'd sway back and forth on the balls of his feet, mumbling something incomprehensible. "Nice day out today, isn't it?" I'd say. Again, the sway and mumble. "Gotta love what they're doing with the Justice League," I'd offer. Silence. Most folks think someone like me opens a comic book shop out of sheer love of the medium. There's certainly some truth in that. But that's not really the meat and potatoes of it. I open my store because I love people. There's just no way to make a life devoted to the art of retail without being fascinated by the folks coming through your doors. I won't lie and say that some of them, and some of you, don't drive me crazy sometimes. Like a close-knit family, we love each other's foibles one day and hate them the next. I love hearing you talk about whatever's on your mind. I love hearing about your day, your life, and your comic book passions. In my store, the employees and customers talk so much that time loses meaning and the world outside follows suit. Then there was Jerry. Jerry and I shared only 6 words on each visit for nearly 2 years. $3.24. After 104 weeks of being a part of this ritual, I decided it was about time to throw a wrench in the works and see what would happen. Jerry came in one lazy afternoon. There was no one in the store but me and my music. I said, "Hello." We'd gotten to the stage where he'd nod in my direction. All things considered, I thought that was great progress indeed. He found his one gem for the week and made his way to the counter. I smiled as he pushed the book toward me. I smiled as I rang him up. I smiled as he looked at me, waiting for the sound of my voice. No numbers came out of my mouth. "My name's Judd. What's yours?" Poor guy. I'd caught him painfully off guard. I'd looked him right in the eyes and veered from the script. Jerry convulsed as if he'd been hit by a great gust of wind. He made a gasping sort of sound as the coins in his palm exploded and sent themselves flying every which way. There was a dreadful silence. His face was fiery red and his hands were still trembling. I felt terrible about what I'd done, but the whole scene just tickled me 6 ways to Sunday, and I burst out laughing. Jerry stared at me, befuddled. Then, slowly, he began to laugh. There we were, 2 grown men, laughing about scaring the heck out of one another and making a big mess. We got down on our hands and knees, recovering what had escaped, and laughed the whole way. There, down on the floor, this strange and eccentric visitor finally showed up to the party. "I'm Jerry," he said, enjoying the sound of his own voice. "Nice to finally meet you, Jerry," I said. "I've wanted to for quite some time now. I wish I could tell you we ended up becoming close personal friends. I wish I could tell you I learned everything there is to know about him as a human being. I wish I could regale you with years of stellar conversation and shared intimacy, if wishes were horses. You know how it is when you start thinking about something more often and suddenly you begin seeing it everywhere you look? That's exactly what happened to me with Jerry. I started seeing him around the neighborhood all the time. Obviously, he'd always been there, but I'd only just begun to notice. Hey, there's Jerry at the bus stop. There's Jerry crossing the street. Is that Jerry eating an ice cream cone? I've waved to him from my car and had the gesture returned. I've passed him on the sidewalk and called out a quiet, "Hey!" And I've seen him going home at night and felt strangely comforted that I knew where home was. Not too far from my store is a fixture of the neighborhood. It's a residence for adults with mental illness who are still productive members of the world, but need a safe place to call their own. Some of the residents occasionally cause trouble at our stores. We have to train our employees to be sensitive to their personalities. Some of them require treatment that takes them far away from the promise of a stable environment. But only one of them is Jerry. I see this man in my store every week. It seems I'm the only one, since no one else pays any attention to him at all. I suspect that's just the way he likes it. I've made him uncomfortable when I've held up a long line of customers so he can casually sort through his change. He's allowed me to reach into his palm myself from time to time. It makes it easier on him, and I'm honored that he lets me. These days, when he enters the shop, he enters laughing. Maybe when he sees me, he thinks about the 2 of us on the floor hunting for pennies. I know that's the first thing that comes to my mind when I see him. "Hi," he says. To which I reply, "Hiya, Jerry." "How are you?" says he. "Just fine. And you?" "Fine," he says. And I say, "Well, that makes 2 of us." And that's really all there is. Sometimes he'll spit out a spontaneous comment like, "Time for some Trinity," or "Aren't those Teen Titans fun?" I always heartily agree with him, because I genuinely do. Sometimes I'll slip some free comics into his bag. Minutes later, he'll rush back in and say, "These aren't mine." To which I reply, "Yes, they are, Jerry." He'll say, "But I didn't buy these." And I'll say, "So? Doesn't make them any less yours, does it?" Then he'll light up as if he just won the lottery. The relationship I have with Jerry is as valid and rich as I have with any of my other customers, maybe even more so. The money he spends is truly inconsequential. He's quietly been a member of my store and my community for years, and weaves in and out among us like a spirit. The lucky ones are the ones that can see him. I enjoy the few minutes a week I spend with him, and he enjoys the same with me. $3 or $3,000. That's the kind of enjoyment no amount of money can buy. The Blast Off podcast is produced by the Colonel, Jeff Fox, Scott Tipton, and me. Original music is composed and performed by Derek Anthony Gray. You can find more of his musical compositions on his website, DerekAnthonyGray.com.
For more information about anything you've heard us talk about today, check us out online at blastoffcomics.com. We have an active Facebook presence, so check us out over there on Facebook. And you can reach us on Twitter at BlastOffComics or on Instagram.
Or you can come by our retail location in North Hollywood in the heart of the Arts District, 5118 Lankershim Boulevard in North Hollywood, just 2 blocks south of Magnolia. See you soon.